I think you've said a number of times that you believe the US is still leading in the AI race, but there are a number of factors to consider, particularly on biotech as well, which we'll get to a little bit later. But take that and run with it. You know, your current attitude to this market.
I mean, you're just talking about distillation. China, for the last few decades, has been very good at doing whatever they can to copy and steal our IP and our trade secrets. And this is no different, right? And unfortunately, we are, I don't know if it's 6 months ahead or 12 months ahead or what it is. We are significantly ahead. And you know, in a world where the agents are doubling capabilities every few months, that's a very, very large gap, which means we're way ahead in cyber. It means we're way ahead in other critical areas that will allow us to compete with China. So it's a great spot we find ourselves in, and we got to make use of it. And you know, I think it's almost silly to expect the government to be able to stop them from stealing. We haven't done that for years. It's going to be up to these companies to figure out how to detect and stop these attacks, because that's the only way it's going to happen. You're
a venture investor, but also a serial entrepreneur, founder, call it what you will. It's interesting to read some remarks by Palmer Luckey the other day saying basically stop patenting things, because the moment you put something into a patent, it becomes vulnerable to theft, is how he would put it. You're just educating our adversaries. I mean, the patent office is completely broken at this point. You will have things in China, in the biotech world, for example. In biotech, you kind of have to patent certain things because you have a molecule you put all this money into, and you don't want someone else to be able to obviously, you know, sell that molecule. But China will, within 24 hours, someone in China will see a new target you're patenting, and they'll see the results, and they'll start their own programs and even file other patents themselves right away that are similar but just different. And the whole thing is a mess right now. You are very focused on biotech in the context of US versus China. I think you have some strong feelings about it, but raise the alarm on it. What is the sort of core of your concern?
Well, you know, obviously we work in defense, and we work in healthcare, and we work in other areas. And you know, biotech's a very exciting area right now in particular because AI is going to allow us to cure a lot of diseases. It's already making some really, really big breakthroughs, since this is one of the most exciting new areas. But China has been successfully stealing our sector over the last 7 years. And so we've gone from being the vast majority of new therapeutics and drugs in the U.S. And now China, if you look at the curve, it's come up to well over a third of all the new ones, and in some cases more than a half of what you can measure earlier stage. So they're basically taking over the sector. And it'd be one thing if they were purely doing this on a competitive basis. That's, you know, if people are really talented and they're doing it competitively, that would be fair. But it's not like that. What it is it's taking U.S. firms and taking U.S. investors and getting them to be able to do things cheaper and better in China. It's stealing things using a patent office. It's stealing things using PhD for people who come over here and are forced to send things back. Like, the whole thing is a very active kind of rape of the sector, and it's also exacerbated by the fact that our FDA is slow. So, for example, in China, if you want to take a drug to a phase 1 trial, it takes, some places you can just do it right away for certain areas, and some places it's 90 days for the pre-IND and IND, it's called, to go to a phase 1. In the US, the pre-IND and IND, over 700 days. So we have to accelerate this if we're going to compete.
What about through the lens of 8VC? So I think you wrote recently that America needs to beat China and unleash cures.
Yes.
How does your activity as an investor and what 8VCs focus on reflect that? What's in the portfolio that you think you're supporting to enable that?
I mean, listen, there's so much exciting stuff going on. We had really great news in the last couple of weeks. Orca Bio was officially approved, got their label. So that means it went through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and the data was so strong that it got through it a little bit faster than normal, and is able to basically do bone marrow grafts, which are used against blood cancers, much more safely, much higher survival rate over the first year. And then this also has lots of potential applications against autoimmune diseases like Crohn's and multiple sclerosis. So I mean, that company is very exciting to me. There's a lot of other stuff we're doing with AI and antibodies, antibody platforms, with Alloy, for example. So there's just a lot of new discoveries being made. The problem is, if we have a new discovery made, we're confident it's going to save a lot of lives. If we invest in it and China is able to copy it and go faster, it stops our ability to invest in it. So what we're fighting for is I want the ability to make profitable investments where the business is built in the U.S. and not stolen to China because our system is broken.
You were raising also an interesting point about oversight. Earlier in the program, we had FCC Chairman Brendan Carr on talking about regulating space. That's the FCC. So in this case, it's the FDA. And how much you feel the FDA should have direct oversight of how AI is used in that field.
It's a good question. Listen, I think there's a spectrum here, right? And I'm not some kind of like wild-eyed radical that wants anarcho-capitalism and no government. That's not what I'm arguing for. There's a spectrum where I think Europe, we all see, has gone way towards safetyism, towards a culture of proceduralism where nothing gets done and everyone attacks new things and they take forever, right?
Europe, you mean from the bloc's perspective, the regulatory perspective?
From the regulatory perspective, I was just over there. Like, none of the bottle caps come off. It's their big innovation, right? But everything's very slow, and they've had far fewer big wins the last 50 years because of that. And so that's obviously a failure case. And then I'm not arguing to go all the way to no regulation, but right now, FDA is very slow. It's very unaccountable. It's like a mafia where if you criticize it too much, they might just decide to make you wait a year. It's unaccountable, unchecked power. We shouldn't have that in a free society. We should have multiple bodies that have to compete. We should have multiple paths, and they should be held accountable to going faster.
Let's go back from the focus of the vertical of biotech to broadly AI in America. Where do you see America's biggest advantage right now?
I mean, our biggest advantage is that we are still like the most free society with property rights and checked power and the ability to have what we call creative destruction. So when we come up with new technology, with this AI wave, there's a lot of new possibilities for higher productivity in every industry. It's changing how defense works, changing how manufacturing works, changing how healthcare works. And we do have, in some areas, too much regulation, but overall, we still have a society, unlike China, where it's going to be much easier to redo our industries and to shift them in ways that are much more productive. So not only are we ahead in AI, we're also ahead in deploying it to a bunch of areas.
Later in the program, we're going to zero in on defense tech. You know, you co-founded Palantir 2003?
That's right, 23 years ago.
So like, take that experience, but specifically to AI, software side, right? How does this administration facilitate success differently to prior administrations? You know, what is your experience present day, 2026, versus what it was like when you guys started Palantir and you were trying to get this into the real world, the software itself?
Well, listen, I don't think, defense in America is not a very partisan thing, which is great, by the way. I think this is not a question about even this administration, which is doing a great job, but I think it's like a shift in the mindset of the Pentagon, which was been reflected for the last several years. And what you've seen is that Palantir and SpaceX, and then later Anduril and Saronic, broke through. And when they broke through and showed these better solutions, showed what was possible, it was 10 times better than what was there before. The admirals learned, the generals learned, and people in procurement said, wait a second, we can't just keep giving these like giant documents written by Raytheon and Lockheed and all the other primes, the full power to block everyone else. We have to actually say, let's have more open competition. Let's let in new possibilities. And you're seeing that cultural shift happen pretty dramatically over the last 5 or 6 years. I have friends, like Emil, who's undersecretary and engineering and research, and people like DepSec Feinberg and the secretary and others who are being a lot bolder in pushing things in the right direction. So you're definitely seeing, though, the culture of the whole place has been moving in the right direction for years now.
Big recent news is that 8VC closed a $1.5 billion fund, the firm's largest to date. And I think we just start there. I don't think you've said very much more about the fund than what's in that post on the screen on X.
Yep.
Timing, why, what for?
I mean, we're in the middle of the most exciting, revolution, industrial revolution, I'd call it, in a very long time in the United States. And we've had our best couple years ever at the firm. There's just a lot of things happening that are possible now that were definitely not possible a couple years ago in the economy. And, Palantir, as an example, I think before AI was probably worth $30 or $40 billion. And past AI now is valued at over $300 billion. I think this is a 10x bigger wave, similarly than anything we've seen before, versus the SaaS wave you're doing versus what's going on now. And we have companies across the board growing 5x, 10x a year. It's a really fun time.
When, Joe, do you and VC get into those? What stage do you principally deploy at, and how do things kind of cross your desk? I always find that part interesting.
Yeah,
how you find them.
So this is 8VC's 7th core fund. And, we're a little bit different in that about 30% of our money goes towards things we help found ourselves and build ourselves. Companies like Saronic, which we'll talk about, companies in healthcare and logistics and other areas as well. We're usually seed, Series A, some Series B. So we're earlier stage investors. But these days, like a Series A could be a $60 or $100 million round, and we could be doing 50 of that from the fund. So it's a lot bigger checks. So having a $1.5 billion fund in venture capital today I would say it's sort of like having a $400 or $500 million fund a decade ago.
Right. It reflects where the market is
in terms of how much you do and the size and the if someone were to tell me 15 years ago I was doing $1.5 billion fund, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. That's so much money. Now it's like a reasonably normal size top venture firm.
What about from the LP's perspective? I appreciate that there's value in discretion, right? But what is it the LPs ask you about their interest in AI broadly, what they sort of, they're investing with you because they want exposure to something specific?
Yeah, it's always unclear. I'm supposed to like boast about my returns on TV or something, but I think just like when you absolutely hit it out of the park and you're in a bunch of things that are working. I mean, we were lucky to get to work on Airborne with Palmer Luckey last year, right? We're lucky to get to work on, I mean, just a long list of these things that are working very, very well in our portfolio, both in defense and in kind of core AI cognition we led around last year, and it's absolutely crushing it. One of the most important new AI companies. I think it's had 3 rounds now since we got in a year ago, right? So the pace of everything, like things that happen now in a quarter is like things that used to happen in a year. It feels like the pace is sped up 4 or 5x, and so I think there's only a certain number of firms that are involved consistently in a bunch of the very, very top talent and best companies, and so you end up being very oversubscribed.
So
on these things.
Scott's a regular on the show, and you're a visitor to San Francisco, a regular visitor.
Yes.
But up by Broadway Tunnel, there's a bus stop ad, and it says Devon, but it works better now, and that's all it says.
I mean, it keeps getting a lot better. It's really good.
It's just it's just how like some of these companies, from a very small start, have grown quickly, but got themselves into the culture of what's happening in industry.
It's really fun right now because I'm working with these entrepreneurs, and a lot of them. I'm 43 now, so my karma is I have to work with like a little bit difficult young people, right? Which that's what I was 20 years ago, I suppose. But now it's like, I mean, these companies are growing to billions of revenue in 3 or 4 years. One of the entrepreneurs we're working with, they're like doubling revenue every quarter, and you're having a conversation, how are we going to keep doubling for the next 3 or 4 quarters? And I mean, it's really fun. This is stuff you can never have done before.
You said a moment ago you're coming off the back of 2 very good years at the firm. What do the exits look like then? You're talking about returns as realized through an exit, or these are
I mean, there's both. I mean, listen, we were big investors in XAI and X, which became SpaceX, and we're very happy to be involved in that. I'm very, very bullish, going to hold on to that for a long time. I think Elon's right. It could be bigger than the economy of the Earth if we get it right. But so I mean, I guess that's an exit. I mean, we're invested in all sorts of things in AI that are likely to go public soon. We have other things we invested in that have just had 7 or 8 up rounds and that have high margins and billions of revenue now, right? So I think it's a spectrum. I mean, I don't really plan on exiting our very best defense positions for the most part. I think these are things that you could exit. You could obviously sell the entire Anduril position or Saronic position or others, but we're not going to do that for now.
I want to ask you a final sort of more academic question, which is everyone, uniformly at the moment has said we've moved from software is eating the world to now hardware is eating the world. Does that reflect where 8VC is currently positioned, or you still think that there is a world for both as an investor?
I'm really focused on how we bring more advanced manufacturing to the U.S., and that's going to involve a lot of AI and a lot of hardware. I think to be able to do what the manufacturing engineers in China can do, we have a lot more to build here. We have some of our companies working on that problem. I think in general, we're focused on productivity and outcomes. And so, yes, hardware is very important, but I think outcomes, I mean, listen, you have a $5 trillion a year wages in the services industry in the U.S. This is a massive industry in the U.S. And if we can make those outcomes, 2 or 3 or 4 times more productive, which we've seen we can, that's just going to be a multi-trillion-dollar wealth creation. So hardware is important, but I wouldn't just ignore outcomes in these other massive industries that we're clearly transforming right now.
Joe Lonsdale, 8VC, stay with us. We have a story out of Europe. European drone startup Helsing has closed a $1.8 billion funding round. It's an $18 billion valuation. The round cementing the firm as Europe's largest defense startup, demonstrating investors' continued interest in the region's defense firms amid, of course, the ongoing war in Ukraine. Investors included Goldman Sachs, Dragoneer Investment, JP Morgan Chase. But Helsing says the company remains predominantly European-owned. So let's focus in on defense tech, Joe. I mean, interesting case study out of Europe. Yeah. I don't think you guys are in
Listen,
Helsing.
my good friend Jeanette Furstenberg, who helps run General Catalyst,
yes.
She was an early investor there before she was at GC. I think it was founded by people who had been at Palantir in Europe, and so we're fans of them. It's a very
the
very
ecosystem is a lot of people that know each other.
I'm very lucky to have all these people who helped me build Palantir and Adapar, like Scott Wu, for example, from Cognition from Adapar. building and running a lot of these, dozens of top companies right now. So it does tend to come from a small number of places, and a lot of these people did used to work for us.
You talked a little bit about, there's no plan for some time to get out of Anduril or Saronic. You are long-term investors in those, but Saronic in the here and now. There was news just before we came to air.
It's an exciting morning.
So could you explain it to us, the basics of what CENTCOM is demonstrating in a video? I think we're going to pull the video up.
Yeah, well, listen, CENTCOM just put this out, so I can only say what's public, but they said there were 3 Corsairs involved in an attack on the Bandar Abbas base, and so these are unmanned drones. These are the same drones that saved the pilots in the Strait of Hormuz, when the Hitachi crashed last month, and in this case, they're being used in an attack. And, right now there's 3 of them, and you can imagine what you can do with hundreds of them.
Saronic, I think, is the biggest position or individual company, or size scope it for me.
We have quite a few large positions, but Saronic we co-founded out of the firm, and
that's what you explained earlier. The format's different.
It's an 8. So 30% of our money goes towards companies we help build. So Dino is the main founder, along with Vib, Dino from Mavrukas, who is a Navy SEAL, and they've built an amazing team of top talent around them in Austin, Texas, and just so many people in AI and hardware, people who experience from Tesla and other places. And they're scaling very, very quickly. It's one of the most important defense companies in the U.S.
Joe, could I ask you for your assessment of how Secretary Hegseth has or has not changed the relationship between the Pentagon, the Department of War, and how it works with startups, essentially, not just the private sector?
Listen, I think it's become more obvious to the leadership in the Pentagon that the very top startups are way ahead of the primes in a bunch of areas. And what they've done is they've shifted things, and he's been very bold about this, to focus on fair competitions, to let others break in, let others prove they can create designs. I mean, what was happening before is the incentives were to create very, very exquisite designs that were very, very expensive. So you might be able to build the best thing in the world, but it's 100 times more expensive. And what Palmer and Anduril and Dino at Saronic and others have demonstrated is actually there's designs that you can make 100 or 1,000 more of these for the same cost, and that are in many cases even better.
One of the things we've been tracking over the last couple of years is sort of, it's declassified allocations. A lot of it still goes to Lockheed, but do you see it changing? The proportion.
Yeah, no, I think this is what people don't realize is we're still the little kids in some ways. I mean, we have the best stuff, but it's growing from a small base, and it's growing very quickly, and you're starting to see very large, very important contracts that are changing the nature of warfare and what's possible with these new companies. But the vast majority of money is still captured by the primes. The primes have these congressional districts locked down where they're producing things in 49 states, and it's kind of bolted into the NDAA that they automatically get the contract even if their stuff sucks because it's a jobs program. It's not about deterring our enemies. But slowly over time, our Congress is waking up and saying, wait a second, this shouldn't just be about a jobs program. There's actually bad guys in the world. We actually have way too much debt in this country. Let's spend less money on better things, even if it's not as politically connected.
Joe, we're just in the last 45 seconds of the show. The next frontier in defense tech for you, a specialist area that you're most focused on?
Well, listen, I think there's a lot of stuff going on with massive production of drones on the land, which is like overland, in the sea with Saronic, in the air, of course, with so many different companies, and in space as well, with Apex and others dominating that area. And I think how we counter that with new forms of high power microwave, with people like Epirus, and in other types of electronic warfare, there's just lots of advances being made there. So it's a very dynamic time, really important to engage in this and stay ahead of the bad guys.